All right, we are recording today. Now let's maximize this for the audience. Greetings, viewers. My name is Jason Poolish, and today I'm here with my colleague and friend, Allison Crisp from A Crisp and Healthy Life. We are here today to kick off our four-part series highlighting the pitfalls and dangers that surround the animal agriculture industry and how it impacts our society. In this first presentation, we will be discussing pandemic diseases and the role that animal agriculture has played in the rise of microbes with pandemic potential. First, let's introduce ourselves. Allison, or Allie as she goes by, like myself, is a functional nutritionist. Allie focuses on plant-based nutrition, stress management, and rheumatoid arthritis. She works really hard to empower you to be and feel your best. A little about me. I also focus on plant-based nutrition, but I also have a background in mindfulness meditation and mindful eating. I focus on using plant-based nutrition and mindful eating in the treatment and prevention of metabolic disorders such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, etc. In addition, I also hold a master's degree in natural resources, and I have experience working with the U.S. Forest Service teaching environmental education, fire ecology, and environmental planning. For the first part of the lecture today, I will be leaning heavily on this previous knowledge and education as it was a major driver for the development of this series. So, to our next slide, here's a quick overview of our talk today. Today we will review 4 diseases that arise from animal agriculture wet markets, and then we will take a look at 3 different diseases that have arose via industrial animal agriculture, the predominant form of animal agriculture in the industrialized world. So while some recent infectious diseases have arisen from wet markets, it's industrial animal agriculture which will likely be the major threat to humanity in the future. After my half, Allie will jump in and take it from there to use her knowledge and expertise to discuss plant-based nutrition, where she will focus on plant food groups, immune support, some transition tips, some simple plant-based food, and what most of you really want, some simple recipe resources. With that being said, let's get started. Dr. Greger from nutritionfacts.org wrote this quote, and it's something that's really impacted us. This is the overarching positive outcome we would like this series to get across. We have the ability to change, and we can make massive progress in a variety of major issues of national and global concern by collectively working to change our diet. All right, let's get to some of these pandemic diseases. Now, most infectious diseases originate in animals. Now, please be aware that today we will be focusing on viral diseases and won't even mention bacterial diseases with animal agriculture implications. Also, please keep in mind this quote. Out of the emerging pathogens, 132, 75%, are zoonotic, and overall, zoonotic pathogens are twice as likely to be associated with emerging diseases than non-zoonotic pathogens. All right, let's start with wet markets, and a virus you're all probably familiar with from popular media and outreach over the last few decades, AIDS. Most commonly accepted theories of how the AIDS-causing viruses, HIV-1 and HIV-2, crossed over from chimpanzees and sooty macaque monkeys, both point to the hunting, butchering, and consumption of the animals. While we associate this disease with sex, many have never heard or forgotten how wet markets were a driving force for the evolution of AIDS into a human infecting organism. Our next disease, Ebola, also largely arose from wet markets. Now, Ebola has been around since 1976. A recent outbreak that began in Guyana in 2013 and ended in 2016 killed more than 11,000 people to make it one of the most severe and deadly Ebola outbreaks. At the time of this recording, the most recent outbreak is still ongoing and has claimed the lives of over 2,200 people across the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. It is believed to be due to a new spillover event and thus is a new strain to evolve from an animal reservoir that is unrelated to previous outbreaks. For a little background, Ebola virus disease is a viral hemorrhagic fever that is caused by 4 viruses of the Ebola virus genus, but the most dangerous is simply called Ebola virus. The virus's natural reservoir is thought to be several species of bats. Bats will become a common theme among viral reservoirs, as we'll see in this series. Monkeys, chimpanzees, gorillas, baboons, dogs, and pigs may all be susceptible to Ebola virus infection. Health authorities have placed most of the blame on the prevalence of bushmeat in affected regions, which comes from wild animals hunted for food, including several of the at-risk primates, and most importantly, in the case of Ebola, bats. Without this form of hunting and consumption of bats and other infected animals, Ebola virus would have been unlikely to cross the species gap and gain a foothold in human populations. Although it may be possible through contact with blood, it's just far less likely to happen that way, relatively, given the scale of the bushmeat trade that we know has been going on. And you know, it's really easy for us to call an end to the hunting of wild animals for bushmeat. But it is unlikely to happen if we do not also address the broader issues of everything from the absence of arable land on the continent and water for irrigation to a lack of political will and accessible education. Many factors going into why Ebola virus keeps popping up and why it's so hard to combat and why the bushmeat trade is so prevalent there. Okay, now let's move on to a virus many of us have read about over the last few months, SARS. Severe acute respiratory syndrome infected an estimated 8,000 people, causing approximately 774 deaths. Like its cousin SARS-CoV-2, which we're all familiar with, and causes a similar respiratory affliction, COVID-19, the SARS virus has been genetically traced back to bats in China, though with civets in wet markets acting as an animal to human intermediary rather than pangolins, as we'll see with COVID-19. Wet markets, such as the ones linked to SARS in the Guangdong province in southern China, and in the case of COVID-19, Wuhan City in the central Hubei province, are places where many different live and dead animals are sold. Live animals are slaughtered on site, differentiating them from dry markets. The often unsanitary conditions, lack of regulation in regards to how the animals are kept and killed in close proximity to humans of wild and domesticated animals who would never normally mix has made them a breeding ground for at least 2 devastating viral outbreaks, despite there being coronaviruses around the world. Now, despite this, locals often believe these types of animals are more nutritious in much the same way that many hunters in the US often believe that deer and elk are more nutritious. Now, let's be clear here. There are many places around the world where wet markets flourish. It's not just China. And as we'll see through this series, this is not a wet market issue. This is an animal agriculture issue. Animal agriculture does seem to be the breeding ground for infectious diseases, which it really isn't surprising considering the industrial animal agricultural practices of housing thousands of animals into a closed environment. All right, now this one doesn't need much introduction, but let's do a quick review so we can see how it all ties together, okay, folks? With COVID-19, the coronavirus family It includes viruses that cause some instances of the more run-of-the-mill common cold, along with rhinoviruses. But some coronaviruses cause other diseases such as MERS, SARS, and the current coronavirus disease 2019 COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the outbreak of COVID-19 virus, SARS-CoV-2, is like SARS, thought to have originated from a wet market in China and Wuhan City in central Hubei province, where pangolins carried the virus before it crossed over to humans. Now, other theories currently being debated include whether pigs were the intermediaries rather than pangolins, or even that the virus evolved within humans, passing between hosts undetected over an extended period of time prior to gaining its pandemic characteristics. Now, just as with SARS, all the current arguments apply in regards to the much lower likelihood of COVID-19 occurring without the interspecies mixing bowls that are wet markets, combined with an unchecked trade based on the farming of wild animals. Now, there's been a lot of talk about wet markets, some of it by interests that wish to put the blame of pandemic diseases on developing nations, and China specifically. While China has been a hotspot, it and wet markets are not the only threat. Now, let's turn to the other threat: industrial animal agriculture. And we're going to start with the Spanish flu. Now, it's difficult to say with any certainty where the strain virus subtype H1N1 that caused the 1918 flu pandemic originated before going on to kill as many as 100 million people worldwide, making it one of the deadliest outbreaks ever. Though some have suggested that it likely originated in the United States from an industrial agriculture operation on the East Coast. For those that remember their history, they will recall that this was during the muckraking era of investigative journalism in the early 1900s. This era saw the publication of Upton Sinclair's groundbreaking investigative book, The Jungle, which detailed the horrors of the industrial animal agriculture industry. So it's really no surprise that a pandemic emerged from it. In his 2004 book, The Great Influenza, The Epic Story of the Deadliest Plague in History, author J.M. Barrie examined a number of theories that he also summarized in an article published in the Journal of Translational Medicine. Now, let's move on to BSE, or as we know it, mad cow. BSE stands for bovine spongiform encephalopathy, otherwise known as mad cow disease. And it's a progressive neurological disorder of cows that results from infection by an unusual pathogenic form of a misfolded protein called a prion. Now, research shows that the most probable first infections of BSE occurred in the 1970s, the result of feeding cows BSE-infected meat and bone from a spontaneously occurring case of BSE or scrappy infected sheep products. Now, there's further agreement that the outbreak was then worsened throughout the UK cattle farming industry by the feeding of prion-infected bovine meat and bone meal to calves. Basically, they're grinding up sick cows and sheep and feeding them back to healthy cows and sheep. Now, let's turn to what many consider to be the most serious threat for the emergence of a more serious pandemic like the 1918 flu, swine flu. Now, prior to COVID-19, the 2009 swine flu pandemic was arguably the last major outbreak to cause international concern, with as much as 21% of the world's population, 1 in 5 people on the planet, having been infected with the strain of H1N1 virus responsible, according to one study. The World Health Organization confirmed 18,036 deaths, while the CDC estimated anywhere between 150 to 575,000. We have far surpassed these numbers with COVID-19, and the year isn't even over yet. Now, although there is conflicting claim that swine flu pandemic arose in Asia with no mention of the role of domesticated pigs, This is possibly an attempt by Western business interests to absolve the North American farming industry, because the first human case of pandemic H1N1 09 was recorded in Mexico in early 2009. Researchers from Mount Sinai School of Medicine, authors of one of the more recent studies into the origin of pandemic swine flu, said that small areas with pig farms cannot be ignored and may give rise to more severe global flu. Investigations into the genetic sequence of the virus conducted by researchers at the University of Edinburgh, Oxford University, and the University of Hong Kong in 2009 said that the pandemic had provided further evidence of the role of domestic pigs, with several ancestral viruses having likely circulated in farms for years before mixing genes to create the pandemic strain. This was further evidenced by the discovery of swine, human, and avian-like genetic sequences. Now, in addition to these diseases, I want you to also know that there are several honorable mentions that we just don't really have the time to talk about today, because we really want to end this on a more positive note and give you some tools that you can use to apply in your own personal life. So these honorable mentions include the 1997 as well as 2000 bird flu pandemics, the 1998 Nipah virus, the 1994 Hendra virus, Middle East Respiratory System, also known as MERS, Bolivian hemorrhagic fever, also known as BHF, Machupo virus, West Nile virus, Zika virus, 2016 SARS-CoV, which is swine acute diarrhea syndrome, and the 2009 PD-CoV, or porcine delta coronavirus. All of these diseases have some potential, and they have all risen from animal hosts. Now, hopefully today you will start to think long and hard about how our food system is contributing to the rise of pandemic diseases. It's my opinion that despite medical advances, as long as we rely on animal agriculture to feed the world, it will mean we will live with a serious risk to our civilization due to the role that animal agriculture, both industrial and wet markets, play as incubator factories for serious infectious diseases. On top of all this, I didn't even mention the role that animal agriculture plays in the rise of antibiotic resistance and infectious bacteria that are immune to our antibiotics. Now, let's turn to Allie. I introduced the problem, and she's going to help share with what we believe is the solution. Take it away, Allie. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate your discussion of those pandemic diseases. Now let's try to take a look at how we believe that we can prevent future pandemic outbreaks and really improve our health and support our immune system. So today we're going to look at a brief overview of plant-based nutrition. Really the key here is not to turn anyone vegan. We just want you all to eat more plants. So plants are rich in micronutrients. These are our vitamins and minerals, which are going to be essential for proper immune functioning. Plants also have these compounds called phytochemicals. They're unique to plants, and these can prove very supportive as antioxidants and other mechanisms that will help support our health. And then plants are loaded with fiber, which, as we talk about in a little bit, we're going to see is crucial to gut health and our overall health. So let's get right into this. So first thing I wanted to do was just give you a brief overview of some plant-based food groups. So when we think of switching to a more plant-based diet, for certain people, and myself included, I know it can feel a little bit restrictive initially. When I grew up, I was not eating anywhere near a plant-based diet. I was quite a picky eater, primarily living on grilled cheese, mac and cheese, some chicken, not many vegetables to be found there. So when you think about switching to a whole food plant-based diet or just adding more plants in, you can wonder, where do I begin? But in reality, there are so many more plant foods than there are animal foods. So by increasing the number of plant foods we're eating, we're really giving ourselves more options. So the first category that we're going to look at is, of course, fruits and vegetables. And here, really, I know you've probably heard it before, but eating the rainbow is going to be the key. because every color of fruits and vegetables provide different benefits and different of those phytochemicals that are going to support our health. So as much as you can, try to include green fruits and vegetables, red fruits and vegetables, purple fruits and vegetables, all the different colors at all of your different meals for the most health supporting benefit. The next one is going to be whole grains, and whole is really the key here because when we refine grains, so think about flour or processed foods, what is happening is we're really stripping all the health supportive benefits like fiber and a lot of the vitamins and minerals out. So we want to eat everything in as whole of a form as possible. Next category is going to be legumes, which includes our beans, split peas, lentils, chickpeas, and these are really going to be nutrition powerhouses. They're a great addition to any meal if you want to add some protein, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. You can combine them in many different ways, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And then our last group is going to be nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds are a great source of healthy fats. Healthy fats are really important, especially for brain health. And so nuts and seeds not only provide that benefit, but they're also a great source of protein, fiber, micronutrients, antioxidants, which are going to help us fight oxidative stress, and then increasing satiety or keeping us full for longer amounts of time. You might be wondering, Allie, why is there a picture of mushrooms on the screen when they don't really fit into any category that you're talking about? Well, mushrooms don't fall into any of the 4 major food groups. However, they're a fungus, and they are very health supportive as well, specifically for immune health. They have lots of antioxidants along with vitamins and minerals like zinc. So we want to increase those in our daily diet if we can. If you're interested in learning about more specific strains of mushrooms and how we can use those in a therapeutic manner, reach out to us and we're happy to discuss that with you. Let's see here. Next, we kind of want to switch our focus. So we've learned about the basic food groups. Now, how can we use plant foods to really strengthen our immune system? The first thing we have to look at, as I alluded to before, is our gut health. So we're learning now through more research that gut health is important for not only immune health, but also for our mental health and so many other chronic health conditions. Approximately 70% of the cells that make up our immune system are actually found in the walls of our GI tract. So you can see how important it is that we're going to have a healthy gut bacteria. Now you might be thinking, what is actually happening in our gut? Well, in our gut, there are trillions of little microorganisms, bacteria, that can be either good bacteria or bad bacteria. The way that we're going to increase the ratio of bad bacteria is by eating a standard American diet, eating more processed foods, processed sugars. If we really want to feed those healthy gut bacteria, we're going to want to move on to our next step, which is to fill up on fiber. Now, fiber is found only in plant foods, so that's one of the reasons we need to eat more plants. But this high fiber food actually feeds our healthy gut bacteria. This allows the creation of short-chain fatty acids, which is going to improve our immune system by reducing inflammation and providing energy to our gut cells. Next, we're going to look at micronutrients. Now, micronutrients, again, are those vitamins and minerals. They're abundant in plant foods. There are specific vitamins and minerals we could talk about that have immune supportive benefits. However, I think Jason and I both would agree that we really want to take a food-first approach, and supplementation, though sometimes needed if we're deplete in certain vitamins or minerals, is a little bit dangerous because it isolates a specific vitamin or mineral and doesn't take into account that when we eat a whole food, fruit or vegetable or legume or nuts and seeds, the vitamins and minerals come in certain proportions and they come bound with fiber and other phytochemicals. So we're really getting all the benefit and they're working synergistically together. When we try to isolate a vitamin or mineral, it's hard to recreate exactly how it's supposed to be working, and it's a little bit easier for us to reach toxic levels or excess levels of a certain vitamin or mineral, which we really want to prevent doing. There are 2 vitamins and minerals, or vitamins I should say, that I want to point out. So the first one is going to be vitamin B12. If we're following a plant-based diet, it is essential that we supplement with vitamin B12. So vitamin B12, very important for our energy and immune health. That one is going to be actually created by microbes in the soil. So in the past, when we were in our gathering stage and eating plants fresh out of the ground, lots of dirt on them, not washing them off, we could get adequate levels of B12. Now, however, we can't do that with how we're washing pesticides and other things we don't want off of our fruits and vegetables. So it is important to supplement with that. And then vitamin D, as I'm sure you've heard, also known as the sunshine vitamin. So we're actually able to synthesize it through our skin when it comes in contact with UV rays. However, a recent study actually showed that up to 50% of Americans are deficient or have insufficient stores of vitamin D. And so we would recommend working with your doctor to get tested for vitamin D levels and see if you need to supplement that. And then you can work with a nutritionist on the proper dosage for that. Some things that might inhibit our vitamin D absorption are the color of our skin. Those with darker skin are going to have a harder time absorbing it. Those who are elderly will also have a harder time. A lot of times, if we're out in the sun, we're trying to prevent skin cancer, so we're slathering on sunscreen. That's going to inhibit the absorption as well. And then during the winter months in most parts of North America, we're not going to have access to the adequate UV rays. So important to get those levels checked and supplement if you need to. Okay, so let's take a step away from nutrition. Jason and I are both functional nutritionists, so we don't just look at nutrition, we look at your lifestyle and other factors that we can use to support your health. In terms of immune support, probably the most important thing that we can all do right now to try to improve our immune system is focus on our sleep habits. So we really want to try to establish consistent sleeping and waking times because our body does run off a circadian rhythm. And if we're not going to bed and waking up at the same time, we're throwing off different hormones, which are going to mess with our overall health. We do recommend aiming for about 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, though the actual amount is going to vary per individual. So what I like to suggest is maybe if you have a night where you don't need to set an alarm, you know you don't have to go anywhere, you don't have to be up for anything the next day, try to go to bed at your normal bedtime, the one that you want to establish, and then allow your body to wake up naturally in the morning and see how many hours of sleep that is over a few days if you can, to kind of get your ideal sleep amount. Another thing that can be really helpful is when you first wake up, to expose yourself to natural light. This will help regulate that circadian rhythm. Now, the next thing that I really want to focus on that's really important, especially now given our current pandemic situation, is stress management. Obviously, it's a very stressful time for a lot of people. We are dealing with something that we haven't really seen in our lifetime. We're having to learn how to maybe do virtual school if we have children, work from home, just everything is kind of being thrown around in it's a new world at the moment. So one thing we can do to help manage our stress is really to practice diaphragmatic breathing. And this is going to help us get out of that fight or flight mode and into a more rest and digest mode by activating our parasympathetic nervous system. This in turn is going to reduce our cortisol levels and help reduce inflammation. So an easy way to do this, and it's something that is free, you can do anytime during the day when you're feeling a little bit stressed or overwhelmed, is practice your deep breathing. So you can put a hand on your stomach if you want, maybe even one on your back because your lungs do inflate 360. And then you're just going to want to breathe in through your nose for maybe 4 seconds, hold it for a couple seconds, and then breathe out through your mouth, trying to release all of the air. If you're interested in learning more about mindfulness and meditation, then you can definitely contact Jason. That's one of his areas of specialties, and I'm sure he would love to talk to you more about that. Another thing that we can all do right now is try to get outside in nature and get a little bit of walking in. So exercise is going to increase the levels of immune cells that are circulating in our bloodstream. This is not only going to help our immune system, but it's going to reduce stress. It's going to improve our quality of sleep. So it's really like a win-win-win situation. If you can get outside in nature with fresh air, maybe even some trees, the benefits are just going to be increased. I do want to add a little bit of note of caution here. For those of us like myself that are not elite athletes, now would probably not be a good time for me to decide that I want to train for a marathon or something, because intense exercise or strenuous exercise is going to weaken our immune system. And so maybe focusing on the more restorative, low impact exercises like walking or yoga, some light resistance training might be a more beneficial place to start. So let's talk about how are we going to start incorporating more plants? How can we make this as smooth and as less stressful as possible? So what I really want to emphasize here is that we don't need to restrict ourselves. Instead, we can focus on adding things in to our daily routine. So small steps are really going to add up to big changes. So if that means when you wake up, you've decided you're going to try to focus on your hydration. So when you wake up, you're going to add an extra 8 ounces of water in the morning. That's great. Maybe it means for a lunch or a snack, you're going to try to include an extra serving of fruit or vegetable. Wherever you're at, by slowly adding these things in, it's really going to make it a lifestyle change for you, which is going to help increase the sustainability of the change and your overall success. The next step is going to be make sure that you're gentle with yourself. For many of us, myself included, this is a huge change. And so there are going to be times when we're not perfect. Who is ever perfect? It's really important that you give yourself that grace to experiment with new things, find out what works, realize when something doesn't work, and that it's time to try something different. Next, I really recommend that you are able to surround yourself with support. Whether you need specific individualized support for a health condition that you have and you want to work with a nutritionist, that's a great option. Or even if it just means bringing in family or friends, the more people that you can get into your corner, the more resources that you can search for that are going to help make this transition easier, the better off it's going to be for you. So let's look at some cooking tips, because I know for me personally, cooking was a huge change, because when you're cooking with more plants, you have to learn about new ingredients, you have to learn about new ways of cooking. And honestly, it does take a little bit more time in the kitchen, because right now, especially in the Western world, we're becoming reliant on fast food and convenience food. And as we're going to talk about in our last presentation on lifestyle disease, that's a big contributing factor. So if we want to improve our health, bringing it back into the kitchen, finding ways that we can cook our own food to nourish our bodies is going to be helpful. So the first tip is to really dedicate time to prepare. So for example, you can prepare a large batch of whole grains, and that batch can last you for the whole week, and you can put it in different meals. So you might make a whole pot of oats, you might make a big pot of rice, whatever it is you're making, you can really get creative in how you can use that in a bunch of different meals so that it saves you time throughout the week. The next tip would be to have some staple items on hand. So we're not asking you to completely overhaul your pantry overnight, though we can definitely help you to switch out some items in your pantry if you're interested. But it's really beneficial, especially if there are days, which we all have, where we're really busy, we don't have the time or energy to cook, to have a few items that you can go to for a real nutrient-dense meal. So the first one I want to recommend is canned beans. Make sure that your cans, if you can, are BPA free. But these beans, like we were talking about with legumes, you can add to any meal for a great increase in protein, fiber, and micronutrients. The next one would be to keep frozen fruits or vegetables accessible in your freezer if you have one. Excuse me. So fruits and vegetables, sometimes you'll hear them say that fresh is best. Well, if you're actually picking it off the vine in a farm, then yes, that's going to be the most nutrient dense that you can get. However, a lot of times with our current shopping process, the foods are actually having a very long transit time before they get to stores, and then they're stored in our refrigerator for days to a week, and so they're losing nutrients throughout this time. In some cases, frozen fruits are going to be more nutrient dense than fresh fruits. So don't feel bad about using them. They're also a lot more affordable generally, and they're great to add into smoothies, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. The last thing, which kind of ties into asking for support and building that network, is asking for help. So some of us might have busy lives where maybe we have kids and we don't have the ability to take an hour to cook for ourselves. It's really important that we reach out to our network and say, hey, is it possible if you can watch my kids for this hour so that I can get some cooking done? Or even better, depending on the age of your kids, try to get them involved in the kitchen and involved in the process so they can learn about healthy foods and healthy living, because that will benefit them in the long run. Let's see what's next. Okay, so we're going to talk about some very simple plant-based food. These templates, I'll call them, I won't even call them recipes, are very easily customizable for your whole family, depending on what everybody's preferences are. And they're also great for using up whatever items you have. I did just want to note here, not to forget to have fun in the kitchen. You know, as we learn to cook again and we become more comfortable with it, it really can be a stress relieving process and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. So experiment, try a new ingredient, and just see what happens. So let's talk about smoothies. Now, smoothies are a great way to get a whole bunch of nutrients in at one time. For smoothies, you do need to have access to a blender. So if you don't have access to that, this won't be the best template for you, but we have plenty other options that we can provide you with. And as we talk in our next webinar about social justice, we'll be looking at some more of those really affordable, low appliance needed recipes. But for smoothies, if you have a blender, we're gonna need to focus on 5 things. The first thing we're gonna need for a really delicious smoothie is gonna be liquid to help blend it up. Now for your liquid, you can just go with water, perfectly fine option because everything else you're adding to it is gonna give it the flavor. If you want it to be a little bit creamier, you can add a plant-based milk. What's really cool with more plant-based eating becoming the norm nowadays, there are so many options available. So, you can try either soy milk, almond milk, cashew milk, oat milk. I mean, there's really endless possibilities. If you wanted to, you can even use this opportunity to get some extra antioxidants in by adding an herbal tea. So for example, you could have brewed green tea, put it in the fridge, and then use that as your liquid base. I've also played around with using hibiscus tea, gives a little bit more fruity flavor. You can also use 100% fruit juice. However, I recommend limiting this to about 2 to 4 ounces and adding the rest of the liquid as water, just because fruit juice, while it has vitamins and minerals, is going to strip out the fiber and have a lot more sugar in it. So since we're already adding fruit, for a lot of people, it's just not necessary, but you can add it if you want an increase of a certain flavor. Next, we're going to add our fruits of choice. So here's where you can really get creative. What kind of flavor do you want? What fruits are in season? What fruit do you have access to? And just play around with it. Next, we're gonna add vegetables. So yes, we can add vegetables into our smoothies. This is a great way to get extra servings of vegetables in throughout the day, especially if we have kids and we're trying to get them to eat more vegetables. A lot of times the flavor of the fruit is gonna cover up the flavor of the vegetables. So we can add things like greens. We can also add things like cauliflower. And if you're using frozen cauliflower, it's just gonna add to the texture. You're not gonna notice the taste. The next thing I want to talk about is called bonus add-ins. So to our fruit vegetable liquid, we can add things like seeds. Seeds are going to be a great source of those healthy fats, the essential fatty acids. So we can add in ground flaxseed or chia seeds. We can even add in hemp seeds if we want to increase our protein. We can add in nut butters. We can add in spices if we want to do fresh ginger or turmeric, or if we have powdered versions. Really, the options with smoothies and a lot of these recipes are endless, which is so cool because you're not going to get bored of it. You can try new things every day if you want to. Lastly, depending on your desired consistency and what kind of fruit you're using, you might want to add some ice cubes to get more of a frothy, slushy kind of texture. So what I've done for you here at the bottom is created kind of a sample template for a smoothie that I like to make. For the liquid, we're going to mix half water, half soy milk to get a little bit of that creaminess. Then we're going to add in some fruits. I personally prefer frozen fruits because of the texture that it gives. So I always make sure I have frozen bananas on hand because they're great at just adding to that creaminess of a smoothie. And then we're also going to add in some strawberries and blueberries. For our vegetable, we chose baby spinach. So baby spinach is great because of the greens, it has the least distinctive taste, so you're not really going to notice it. If you're just trying out adding greens to a smoothie for the first time, that might be a good one to start with. I also want to point out that a lot of times I use my freezer as kind of a way to salvage food before it goes bad. So I buy lots of greens for salads, and then if I don't eat them fast enough and I notice they're starting to be a little bit past their prime, I'll just take a Ziploc, freeze a whole bunch of spinach, and then I can use it in my smoothies later on. So just an option there. Then we're gonna add some seeds. I like to do a mixture of the hemp, flax, and chia for all the benefits, but you can do one or none, totally up to you. I do wanna mention it's important that we grind our flax seeds and our chia seeds just so that our body can absorb all the nutrients, not necessary with the hemp seeds. And then if you need to, you can add ice, blend it up, and get it to your desired consistency. Sometimes if I find that I add too much liquid, then I'll just add ice to get it to the right consistency. Other times, if you're trying to make a smoothie bowl and you want this to be something that you're gonna scoop with a spoon, you can add less liquid, but you might need to use one of those tampers on your blender to help the blades process the frozen fruit. Okay, next up, we're gonna talk about building your own bowl. So again, these are really easy to change based on what you have on hand and what people enjoy eating. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna choose a whole grain. Now for bowls, we can make them either savory or sweet. So you can choose between rice, farro, oats, millet, quinoa, buckwheat, barley, bulgur. There's really endless options here. Add your choice of legumes, so those beans, chickpeas, lentils. Add a variety of vegetables and fruits depending on what you have on hand. And then for our bonus add-ins here, we really want to play with spices. So one of the things that's great about plant-based nutrition, at least for me that I found, is as as I tried new recipes and I explored especially different cuisines, especially like Asian cuisines, I got introduced to a whole world of spices, and my goodness, the flavor those things deliver is amazing. Some of my favorite recipes now. So don't be afraid to play around with different spices. You can also add nuts and seeds if you're looking for healthy fats or protein. Maybe top it with some avocado or even some seaweed if you're doing like a deconstructed sushi bowl or something like that. And then I think what's really important for the bowls is to tie it together with some sort of a sauce. So here we have an example of a taco type bowl. You can start with rice of some kind, maybe add some black beans, whether it's canned or dried, doesn't matter. Add some vegetables, so we have some red bell pepper, some corn, some romaine lettuce. Think about what you like to eat on a taco or a burrito and just throw it in the bowl. And then for spices, we can add in some cumin, maybe some chili powder, top it with some avocado, and then to finish it off, add some salsa and lime juice. Again, the options here really are endless, and so I encourage you to play around with it. If you're looking for specific ideas, feel free to reach out to Jason or myself, and we're happy to share some of our favorite meals with you, and we can point you in the direction of other recipes that you may want to try. If you're looking to recreate a favorite recipe but try to veganize it or increase the plants, definitely reach out. Sorry, I'm like talking a lot. Give me 1 second. Okay, so talking about recipe resources. What we've done here is compile a list of some vegan and plant-based chefs that we really enjoy following on social media. So we've included their company name and their handle if you're on Instagram. And the really amazing thing is that there are so many free resources available. So you can just Google, let's say you're really craving lasagna. You can just Google plant-based or vegan lasagna, and you are going to get so many recipe hits that you can play around with depending on the ingredients that you have. But here are just a few that I want to highlight. So the Vegan 8 is a woman named Brandy. She is incredibly creative with the ingredients she uses and the way that the flavors come together. Her recipes are really cool because they're 8 ingredients or less, not including salt, pepper, or water. So if you're looking for something that doesn't require a ton of spices or ingredients, that might be a good place to start. Most of her recipes are also gluten-free and oil-free because she actually went plant-based to help with her husband's health condition. So that's an interesting little backstory. Healthier steps. I just recently made her Instant Pot chili mac recipe, and it is vegan comfort food to the max. So if you're looking for some comforting favorites, she is a great person to check out. Forks Over Knives is a great resource, not only for recipes, but for plant-based information. They have a documentary, they have meal planning, all kinds of things. Plant-based on a budget is going to be really looking at how can we eat more plants in an affordable way, using less ingredients again. She has a really good plant-based ramen. So if you really liked the unhealthier ramen as a kid, she helps you to add some more vegetables to it and still get the same satisfaction. I wanted to include plant-based juniors because they focus on how to get kids to eat more plants and include them in the kitchen. So they'll show you a meal that they're eating as an adult, and then they'll kind of deconstruct parts of it and show you the plate that they're giving to their children. So if you have children, that might be a great resource. The next three are also all great. They really have a lot of comfort food recipes, and they show you that it's really possible. I think this is a big misconception, is that we're so used to the comfort food that a lot of cheese and dairy provides, and we think we can't recreate that in a healthier plant-based way. And some of these recipes really show you that these plant-based versions can be even more delicious than those versions that we grew up with. So really important to try new things, experiment. Again, if you want to start off with a recipe that Jason or I has tried and we feel like it's really delicious, reach out and we're happy to discuss that with you. So here we have tons of references on the next two slides. These are from Jason's part of our presentation, very well researched. If you're interested in reading about any of his sources or learning about more of the things that he was talking about, please reach out for a copy of these slides. We're more than happy to provide that to you. And then we just wanted to leave you with the thought, again, as Jason talks about in our opening quote, you really have power to decide what foods you're eating. And nutrition plays a part in so many global issues, ranging from pandemic diseases, as we talked to today, to social justice issues that we're going to talk about next time, even on the health of our planet and climate change, and then the lifestyle diseases. Really, it is what you're fueling your body with is going to help either prevent, manage, or reverse a lot of chronic diseases. So we do want to encourage you, if you're interested in it, oopsies, sorry about that. If you're interested, stay tuned for our upcoming webinars. We're hoping to be releasing them each month through the end of the year. And then we would love to hear from you. So I'm based here in Honolulu, Hawaii. Jason is based in Seattle, Washington. We both do see clients remotely via secure telehealth sessions. So anywhere in the world that you are, please reach out and we'd love to see how we can work together. Thank you so much.